Welcome back to my video series supporting my publication Construction Grammar, the Structure of English. Today I'll give you a short revision of Chapter 1, the introduction, as well as the first couple of exercises. So in this video I'm quickly going to talk about language and grammar and how construction grammar deals with all of that. Then we will of course have to define what constructions are. I will discuss the two exercises that are part of Chapter 1, and I will also give you an outlook of what to expect from the book. So what is construction grammar? Well, construction grammar is a scientific theory of language that holds that grammar actually consists of words, syntax and more. And it takes a cognitive approach, which means that we look at the mental grammar of speakers, and this is what we want to analyze and scientifically dissect. So what is part of our mental grammar? Well, most simply, and the most uncontroversial bit, is of course that we've all got words in our heads. So if you're a speaker of English, you know what apple means, and if you're a speaker of German, you will call these Apfel, Hungarians say Olma, French pomme, and so on. This actually goes back to an idea by Ferdinand de Saussure, who said that the linguistic sign, i.e. words, are arbitrary and conventional pairings of form and meaning. So the string of sounds a, p, l are tied in your mind to a concept of an apple. And I abbreviate this with single inverted commas here, but of course it's a rich concept of what an apple tastes like, what it feels to hold one, so you can imagine having one in your hand right now. So it's a rich experiential frame. And because we know that different languages use different string of sounds, Apfel, Alma, Pomme, we say that this pairing is language specific, arbitrary, so there is no motivation why it should be called Apfel, Alma or Pomme. But of course conventional, so speakers need to agree that in English everyone who says apple wants you to think of an apple. So construction grammar says that words, which have also been called linguistic signs, are constructions. So constructions are form meaning pairings, just like the linguistic sign. So is construction grammar just a case of rebranding things, of relabeling linguistic signs? This is actually what exercise 1.1 is about, where in the book you will see I asked how is the notion of the construction similar to the classic Saussurian linguistic sign, and in which way does it extend it? Now if we look at words, and at a constructional description of them, we can see there is form and meaning, just like in the linguistic sign. And the symbolic relationship between the two in the book is indicated by this bidirectional arrow. Now, the point about construction grammar is that we think that it's not only words that are represented as form-meaning pairings. Look at the patterns in untrue, unfriendly, and unreal. Now, humans are really good at pattern detection, and you will, no doubt, already have identified the pattern underneath this, that it's un plus something, and it always means not this something. Untrue is not true, unfriendly is not friendly, unreal is not real. So again, we can give a form-meaning representation, a construction representation with a bidirectional arrow that links form and meaning. And you can see that the un has a subscript by the number 1, and that links to not. By this we mean that the string un has the meaning not in this construction. Then the second element is an adjective, true, friendly, happy. And on the meaning level we just give this an abstract label x. And then there's subscript number 3 for the whole form and the whole meaning, which means the whole thing means not x. Why is this useful? Well, if you come across new constructions like someone saying this is so un-Gucci, then even though you might not be able, without context, to be 100% sure what they mean, the schema that I give you on the slide helps you to say, well, it means not Gucci, because this is what the constructional meaning of this schema is. Now, we've already seen in the chapter that it's not just words and morphemes that can be described as constructions, but also idioms like I take things for granted, she takes things for granted, we took things for granted. Here again we find slots, so I can take something for granted, you can take something for granted, which is encoded in the subject slot, which gets the subscript number 1, which relates to A on the meaning level, which doesn't value B, and this doesn't value is linked to take for granted, because take alone in this idiom doesn't mean anything, but it's take for granted that has this meaning of not valuing something or someone. And the object on the formal level that gets the subscript number 2 is linked to the element B, which isn't valued on the meaning level. Then in the book, I also argue that going beyond idioms, if we find patterns like could he shriek himself unconscious, firefighters cut the man free, he'd often drunk himself silly, we see that there's a subject, verb, object and oblique, which corresponds to meaning of A causes B to become C by being. So if firefighters cut the man free, firefighters are in the subject slot, that is linked to A. So firefighters cause B, which in this case is the man, and the free in the oblique slot is to become free. And how does he become free? By cutting. So firefighters cause the man to become free by cutting. So possible answer to exercise 1.1 is that constructions and the linguistic sign have in common that they're arbitrary and conventional pairings of form and meaning, but that constructions go beyond the linguistic sign in important aspects. First of all, constructions have schematic slots, which allow for a certain productivity and creativity. Remember the Angucci example. And that there is no strict lexicon-syntax dichotomy in construction grammar, because it's not just words that are constructions, but also syntactic patterns like idioms or argument structure constructions. And the whole repository of constructions is called the constructicon, similar to the lexicon when you talk about just a repository of words in other approaches. Exercise 1.2 then asks you to sort of give your first constructional template that you abstract from a pattern. So try to identify the construction underlying the following examples and mark which elements are substantive, i.e. phonologically fixed, and which are schematic, i.e. slots. So deafen to make deaf, widen to make wide, sweeten to make sweet. Now you can already see in the first template up here, which would be a perfectly acceptable representation, that you have A, which is again a slot where you can put in deaf, wide and sweet. It's always followed by n, so this is a phonologically substantive element that we can fill by schwa, and the nasal n. And the whole meaning part of this is going to be to make A, so deafen is to make deaf, widen is to make wide, sweeten is to make sweet. So the n bit we can identify as having the meaning to make in this construction. And the A slot is of course productive, and we can put lots of things in there. And the whole thing is going to be a verb. And this is something that you see in the representation below, where we are just a bit more specific. We include the fact that the first slot is filled by an adjective. So deaf, wide and sweet. You are deaf, something becomes wide, something is sweet. So you can see that this is an adjective, though we will talk about work classes in one of the later chapters in more depth. So you can put this in there, and then you will see that at the end of the constructional template, the whole string form, the whole form has the index 3, and that's given as a verb by a capital V. And then on the meaning level, we use this predicate logic notation that I discuss a bit more in the book. But as I said, throughout the book, the representation that I use is one that hopefully will allow you to read many different construction grammar publications from different approaches, but it's not so important that it's a single formalism that you got to learn. It's just trying to be specific about the different levels, and that maybe in the next step you can build on this to go and move on to more formal models of construction grammar. Okay, finally, what can you expect from the book? Well, you've read the introduction, and you will have seen that construction grammar is a cognitive, usage-based approach to language. So in the next chapter, we'll talk a bit more about what this usage-based aspect means, and how all of this ties to language acquisition, how kids are able to learn languages. Then in chapter 3, we talk about verb formation and inflection, classical syntactic topics. And in Chapter 4, we build on this by looking in more depth at words, phrases, as well as idioms. After that, Chapter 5 moves more into what will classically be called the syntactic arena. So we talk about phrases and clauses, but as we will see, these too heavily rely on constructions, on form meaning pairings. After that, in Chapter 6, we can then look at constructional variation and change, how different constructions have come into being, like the future tense, like the future constructions for going to and will future, but also how Englishes across the world have evolved and how construction grammar can tell us something about the direction that they are evolving into. And then finally, we will look at construction grammar approaches, the different types of schools and formalisms that are currently around in construction grammar. We will compare them, and I will show you how the template that we use in the book is a simple first step to understanding all of them. And finally, the book concludes with a quick summary and a couple of emerging topics that I think are important fields of current research and are hot topics in construction grammar, so to speak. Okay, finally, just very briefly, some selected further readings. So if you want to know more about construction grammar, you can look at Adele Goldberg's 2006 book, Constructions at Work. That's a research monograph that was very fundamental to the whole enterprise. Similarly, her 2019 book, Explain Me This, Creativity, Competition, and the Partial Productivity of Constructions, will give you a good idea of where usage-based construction grammar is heading. Though I would advise that you read both of them only after having worked your way through the textbook. If you're looking for an alternative textbook, then I can highly recommend Martin Hilpert's Construction Grammar and its application to English. I think it's very important that for any particular topic there isn't just a single book out there, and Martin approaches things sometimes from a slightly different angle, and I think my book sort of hopefully complements his approach. And there are two handbook articles that I've written on construction grammar, its evolution, as well as the different approaches that I give you as 2017 A and B. Okay, so far so good. I hope you'll find the book useful. It is a textbook, so its success will clearly depend on how helpful it is to you students out there, as well as the instructors who use it in their courses. If there's any feedback you would like to give me, positive as well as negative, if you find any mistakes or if you find any of the concepts not clearly defined or explained, please get back to me, write a comment to this YouTube video, or just send me an email. I look very much forward to your feedback, and I see you next time for a summary of Chapter 2. See you then.